Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on the Renewable Heat Incentive. My name is Janet Wood. I'm the editor of New Power magazine, but we have with us this afternoon three people who are right at the centre of the Renewable Heat Incentive policy and are full of information about how it works and how you can access it. What we're going to do this afternoon is hear from all three speakers. We've got Patrick Alcorn from DEC, Paul Heigl from Ofgem, and Ben Glancy from Newform Energy. We'll hear from all three, and then we'll throw it open to answer your questions. You can put forward a question at any time by using the button at the bottom of your screen. There's a red icon with a speech bubble. If you hover over it, you'll see that's a Q&A. So just submit your questions at any time. But now I think we'll move straight on to our first two speakers who are going to speak together. That's Patrick Alcorn from DEC and Paul Heigl from Ofgem.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Patrick Alcorn, and I'm head of the Domestic RHI at the Department for Energy and Climate Change. As you all know, winter is coming. Homeowners are turning their heating on, finding problems with their heating. Now is traditionally the period of highest gas boiler, oil boiler sales in the market. And we're seeing, last year we saw an average energy bill of over £1,200 a household. 75% of that or so is heat rather than electricity. And if you're off the gas grid, you'll be paying potentially 50% more for your heating oil and up to 100% more for your LPG when compared to gas, mains gas. So what we're seeing here is growing bills, people locked into bills, people locked into technologies that they don't particularly like or want but have no real choice. We're also seeing people, therefore, trying to eke out extended life of their boilers, making them last for 20, 25, 30 years without realizing just how inefficient those boilers become, and their bills going up not just because the cost per unit of heating oil has gone up, but actually because their boiler is having to burn far more oil than they did previously to get the same amount of heat. This is important because the domestic RHI is designed to compensate people in the off-gas areas, so having heating oil or LPG, and when we come to the numbers a little later on, I want you to bear that in mind. So the RHI scheme has been around in its entirety for 3 years now. The non-domestic scheme was launched in November 2011. It's a 20-year payback scheme, paying out quarterly over 20 years on metered heat. And so you have to install a heat meter in most cases, and you'll be paid on exactly what you use, with payments being more in the winter, less in the summer. And the important thing on the domestic side for this is that non-domestic includes communal heating, district heating networks, and in fact any situation where a boiler heats more than one building, even if that is just two houses. That would be a non-domestic application and scheme. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. The domestic scheme, which we introduced in April of this year, is where you have a single boiler for a single household, and is designed differently in order to appeal to homeowners much more. So we've taken that 20 years of benefit, squeezed it down into 7 years of repayments, and to give consumers who may well need to borrow money, the capital to do this, to make this investment in the first place. We have deemed the calculations based on the EPC, the Energy Performance Certificate heat demand created by a Green Deal assessment. So what that means is that households will get equal payments throughout the year. So what they get paid in December and what they get paid in June will be the same. It's not, the payments aren't related to the heat use itself. And that's important because people who borrow money obviously have to pay equal instalments. It's much harder to keep money back, especially over Christmas and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that they had that cash flow to secure it. As I say, the scheme has been running for 6 months already. We've had over 10,000 accreditations. We're doing work with those who've applied, and as you can see from the slide, high levels of satisfaction, high levels of people believe the installation process is easy, and that's because these are tried and tested technologies. These technologies have been used across Europe for a generation where they haven't had cheap oil or cheap gas to provide heating. The building standards are required in almost all of European countries, including Scandinavia, where obviously temperatures are much colder in the winter, and these technologies still provide the heat required to heat a house effectively. So these are tried and tested products, tried and tested technologies that can be installed in this country today. They just work differently to what some people are used to in terms of the cycles and the heating profiles. The scheme has been designed to give people that choice. So where they're on oil, the RHI should be able to give them a genuine choice about how what heat technology they put in, and how they heat their home and their hot water. So it's designed to compensate for that additional cost and the barriers of doing that, as well as taking into consideration fuel bills. We do require a Green Deal assessment as a requirement, because that will give us the amount of heat needed, but also because any boiler, whether that's fossil fuel or renewable, will work more efficiently when the house is more efficient. So, as the Minister would say, the best energy is the energy we don't need to use, and that's the cheapest way of meeting our targets. We also require MCS for both the installer and the product, and that is because you wouldn't get a gas boiler fitted without gas safe, and MCS provides that same quality assurance and same standards and same consumer protections for renewables as other schemes do for the more traditional fuel sources. So we would insist, in fact, if you don't get your product or your installer through the MCS, you wouldn't be eligible for the scheme at all. So the scheme covers 4 technologies, 3 of which, the air source heat pumps, biomass boilers and ground source heat pumps, are direct replacements for a fossil fuel boiler. Solar thermal is an add-on that you can place with any of the other technologies, and you get a tariff for that, or indeed just alongside the oil or the gas boiler in order to make those more efficient, and you can still get a tariff for those. The numbers on the slide in front of you, I'm not going to go through, but you can see the variation in some of that. And that's because your house will be different to my house and to everybody else's home in terms of the amount of insulation, the amount of floor space, the type of windows, the number of people living there, the age of the people living there, and all of that will affect the heat demand on your property and therefore the cost of the technology, the installation that you will need to heat the space and the hot water for that property. To that end, we have created an online calculator, the RHI calculator, and if you search for that online, it will come up, and that will give you the income stream, so for your house, and that's the bottom line that you see there. So it will take your house, the characteristics of your house, work out the heat demand, and then multiply it by the tariff and give you an income stream. But it's really important to remember that as part of the calculation, the renewable space heating technologies bring with them significant bill savings year on year. So if you look at those, my parents live in an off-gas grid home. Their oil bill's about £2,000 a year. A conservative saving for any of those technologies would be about 25%. So that's £500 a year bill savings, 15-year life expectancy of the technologies minimum, so you're saving £7,500 as part of this package, as well as getting the tariff, as well as being willing currently to invest £3,500 for a brand new oil boiler without any form of return at all. So what we've designed here is not a financial instrument that's going to make you a good pension plan. It is a financial instrument that will allow you to move to renewables and benefit from the savings while overcoming the capital burdens. There is a process that we expect people to go through, and we would advise, for the very reasons of the differences in houses, that you find an installer and talk to them about your property and what is right for your property. The technologies work differently and more effectively in different circumstances, so your circumstances will dictate what is right for you. You will need to check with Ofgem, and Paul's going to tell you a little bit more about what they have done about the product and make sure that it is on our product eligibility list. We are compensating people for the better quality products, and therefore we have limited what products you can choose on the scheme as part of that process, to make sure that we're not wasting taxpayers' money and that we're getting good quality installations. As I say, you must have a Green Deal assessment. The exception for that is if you are self-building a property, where building regulations will both tell us that require you to have loft and cavity wall insulation where possible, which is our energy efficiency criteria, but it will also tell us what your space heating and hot water demand is as part of the building process. The third thing that the Green Deal assessment does for people is to give them an idea of what further in energy efficiency they can do as part of the build, as part of the design, as part of the process. If that is done after the original EPC, so if you install solid wall after the EPC has been done, we will still pay you for the amount of heat you needed before that, and that is designed to drive customers to being more and more energy efficient as part of the process. If you don't have loft and cavity wall insulation, then you will need to do those and have an EPC that show that you've done them to be eligible for the scheme. Only the owner can apply, and MCS certified products and installers to be eligible. The key point on the right-hand side of the screen as you look at it is public grants, where actually if you have been given a grant that you're not repaying, you'll need to declare that, and we will deduct it so we don't pay you twice. But any money that you get as a loan through Green Deal finance, through ECO, which is from the private sector, or indeed from a local authority as a loan that you're repaying through a credit union or the like, all of those sort of things you can keep on top of the money that the RHI will give you. And just to say that anybody who installed on or after the 15th of July 2009 who has an eligible installation is able to claim the money and needs to do so by the 8th of April 2015. The application process, and Paul's going to show you a lot more about this in a minute, is very quick and simple. You just need a little bit of information which will be provided for you as part of the process. So your MCS certificate number, your EPC reference number, your Green Deal advice report reference number, and all of those can be highlighted by the personnel that deliver these for you. The one thing to note is the biomass sustainability list is now open. It's not mandatory yet. That will come in the spring of next year. But from that time, all fuel will need to be purchased from that suppliers list in order for your biomass boiler to be eligible for the scheme. Now, the list does allow for self providers. So if you have a woodland and you are providing wood to your own buildings, then that is eligible, but you will need to register that in order for that eligibility to be brought in. So I'm going to hand you over now to Paul, who's going to talk you through a little bit more about what Ofgem are doing as our delivery partner who are responsible for the delivery of the scheme.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Heigl from the Domestic RHI at Ofgem. As Patrick has just described, there is a journey that you've gone on before you get to the point of applying with us. One thing that we would ask before you apply is to read through our very short essential guide for applicants. It's 15 to 20 pages long, written in very accessible language, and hopefully as understandable and easy to follow as possible. Gives you all the basic information that you need before starting an application with us, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's been described as our application Bible. It's also on the related links section of our Apply Now page, or you can find it through a simple Google search for Essential Guide for Applicants. So, having read that, and you're ready to apply, once you, as Patrick has already said, you have your MCS certificate, your energy performance certificate for the building, and you have your GDAR documents to hand, together with all your bank details, because we'll need those if we're hoping to pay you, you're ready to apply for the scheme. It's an online application, and you'll find it on Ofgem's dedicated Domestic RHI website. If you go to the Ofgem website, then click on Environmental Programs and then select Domestic RHI, you can go straight there. Similarly, you can just type in ofgem.gov.uk/domestic RHI. The application form is as easy as we could make it to complete. Many people are able to complete it in half an hour, some a bit longer if metering is required. We've had people complete it in less than 10 minutes. That is a record though. There is help text all the way throughout, and beside every question there is you can hover over the information button and there's a little more information to give you a bit of a clarity and guidance on what the question's asking you and for your situation how you should answer that. We also have a help sheet which you can download, which guides you through every single question on the application form if there is anything that's even remotely confusing. So the application form itself, it consists of just 2 pages. We try to reduce it down to be as simple as possible for that. The first page has 3 sections. It checks that you, your technology, and your property are all eligible for the scheme. As I've said before, you'll need your MCS certificate number, EPC certificate number, and GDAR reference number, if you have one. You don't need one if you're a self-builder. Providing your answers you provide for the section are in line with the scheme rules, you'll then be asked to move on to page 2. If your answers to page 1 and show that you're not eligible, you won't need to fill out the second page, and this saves you time, but also provides you with information to show you where you need to source new information or where you're not eligible. The second page is between 6 to 8 sections, depending on the answers that you give on the first page about your circumstances. Section 1 just asks for your personal details. This is so that we can contact you and email you with updates and reminders. Section 2 asks you for a password. This is so that you can log into what's called My RHI. This is so that you can manage your account and self-serve. You will need a password that you can remember, because you will need to log into your account every now and then to update us and sign annual obligations. Section 3 is just an address section. You can have a different address for correspondence if you need to, but for most people the address is usually the installation address. Carrying on with the application form, you'll only see section 4 if you have a heat pump. This is where you type in your SPF. So SPF is the seasonal performance factor value, and it determines the efficiency of your system, not just the heat pump. If you're a legacy applicant, you can have this recalculated with your installer before you apply for the RHI, not afterwards. So if you're a legacy customer, and Patrick already described what that was, that's installed after the 15th of July 2009, but before the scheme launched on the 9th of April this year, 2014. If you're a legacy customer with a heat pump and think that your SPF might need to be recalculated, contact your installer and they can do that for you to redetermine the efficiency of your system. This directly results potentially in higher payments, so it could be worth it. But your installer will be able to give you better guidance on that. Some people also get grant funding. Patrick already talked about this. If you get grant funding from a public source, you'll need to declare it at this point. The most common is RHPP, which is the Renewable Heat Premium Payment. At this point, you will need to declare it, and it will be taken off the 28 payments going forward over the 7 years. Question 7 is a mini survey. It helps us understand the cost of your renewable heating system. It has no impact on eligibility whatsoever. It's merely to give us a little more information about your system, about costs, labour, and how you used to heat your home previously. It makes it easier for us to track what changes are being made in the market and with homeowners. And lastly, you'll be asked to input your bank details. This is so that we at Ofgem can pay you, which is what we're hoping to do. We also check that we're paying into your bank account and that you, as the person applying for the scheme, we need to obviously link the bank account and your ID together to make sure you are who you say you are, and the bank account is linked to you. As soon as this is completed, you should have a decision. There'll be 3 outcomes here. So I've just talked about heat pump efficiency. The decision should tell you either in the first instance, congratulations, you're part of the scheme. You will then be able to log into MyRHI and check your payment schedule. It'll tell you every one of the 28 payments over the next 7 years, when that will be issued, and 3 to 5 days later will hit your account. The second outcome could be, we're sorry to say that you're ineligible. There are documents on the links there that will tell you the reasons why that might be, things that you may be able to correct. It may be that you have a product that is ineligible, which Patrick has already talked about. The third outcome is that you're in review. Then this means that there are a couple more bits of information that we may need to check, and we may require you to send in or email us some additional documentation, potentially, for example, on your ID. We might ask for a photocopy of a passport or driver's license, just to confirm that you are who you say you are. So once you've applied, if you've received an automatic accreditation after filling in the application form, or if your application has gone into review, you'll be able to log into MyRHI, as I said before. This is the portal where you can see the status of your application. When your application is accredited, you become a member. Members will be able to see their payment schedule and other details such as addresses of the accredited installation. You may well have more than one installation if you're a landlord or private landlord, and you can track those payments in MyRHI. To find your payment schedule, click on the payment schedule section where the arrow is showing on the screen now, and this will show you all 28 payments going forward. Now, one of the questions we get asked a lot is why your application might need to be reviewed. I'm waiting for the presentation to catch up. There are 5 top reasons why most applicants go into review. The largest segment by a long way is custom builders, or some people know them as self-builders. Applications where the installation is a custom-built property have to be reviewed because Ofgem can make a decision on whether to accredit or reject the application. Really, we need evidence that the house was self-funded and that it was commissioned or built by the person applying. There are various forms of evidence that we ask for this. It's relatively simple, but can put you into review and delay the process for a little bit. If you put the heating technology in after you moved into the property, it doesn't matter if you built the property yourself, you will still need to apply for a Green Deal assessment report and go through the standard application route. We define custom build as where a builder is contracted by a homeowner to create a custom-built house, or where a private individual builds their home as a DIY self-build project. To be eligible to apply for the domestic RHI as a custom builder, must be an individual, not an organisation, must be self-funded, as we said, from your own money. If you or the first owner converted the building into a domestic property or built it yourself from scratch, you're a custom builder. You won't need a GDAR, a Green Deal Assessment Report, but you will need to provide Ofgem with evidence that you are a custom builder. In short, as I said, it's not enough to have just built the property yourself. You need to have an eligible new build property. The second major reason for review is SPF changes. These only apply to legacy applicants because all new installations now have the SPF built into the heat demand on the MCS. So it's only for legacy. This is why I said that if you are a legacy customer and you're intending to apply but think that your SPF may need changing, please go and get that reassessed now, because you cannot do it after you've applied and been accredited. As I said, they only apply to legacy customers. If you're a legacy customer, have a heat pump, have your installer have a look. They should be able to tell you whether they think it could achieve an SPF higher than 2.5. 2.5 is the SPF default that we have on our application system, and if you believe that it's higher and your installer agrees and reassesses it, then we will ask you for that information, that evidence, so you will go into review for that reason. We have to ask for that evidence because it directly relates to payments. As we've already talked about before, grant funding is another a big reason. If you have grant funding, you will need to declare it. We will need to deduct that funding from the domestic RHI payments, and in some cases we may ask to see evidence of that grant funding, particularly if it's something that we can't check with one of the third-party databases, or it's a grant that we haven't heard of before. I would say 80% of the cases we know of the grant, and it's a relatively quick process. The other one that's quite big, and it's usually due to misunderstanding, is that people often tick that they have more than one MCS certificate. The question is quite specific, saying if you have more than one MCS certificate for renewable heating, but obviously people see MCS certificate and often combine and think that solar PV, which is electricity, is included in that. So often it's a misunderstanding. The question is there because we need to check if there are multiple plants supplying to the system. People often, with larger properties, have more than one heat pump to run the system altogether, and we just need to check that every part of the renewable system is eligible for the scheme. So it doesn't matter if you have a wind turbine or a solar PV panel. They're covered by different scheme fits. We're not interested in that because it doesn't contribute to renewable heating. And applicant review, which is another big chunk in red you'll see there, is if Ofgem need to double check your ID. As I said, this is simply needing to ask for documentation such as a photocopy of a passport or driver's license, because the checks on the credit rating databases have drawn a blank or are not able to find the customer. So it's a relatively simple process. At this point, I will hand back to Patrick.
Thank you, Paul. And what we're going to have a quick look at now is a couple of case studies, just to give you an idea of the sorts of things that have actually happened on the ground. So the first one is following the Cumbrian floods a couple of years ago. A family doing a retrofit installed a ground source heat pump to replace an oil boiler. Did some other things, so they put underfloor heating in, solar PV for their electricity, and as a result they're saving £1,000 a year on their energy bills, which obviously is quite a significant amount for 15 years. And if you then look at a family down in Sussex, 4-bedroom home, off the gas grid, using LPG on a very old LPG system. They've done an air source heat pump, underfloor heating. They only, I say only because the next number is quite large, but the tariff paid them will pay them £7,500. But they're saving, they estimate, they will be saving about £1,800 a year as a result of the air source heat pump. So some of these numbers are quite big for the bigger properties. So it is a very much a case of going out, talking to an installer and finding out what works for you, what works for your property. And the last thing I just want to leave you with is the fact that we have been through this quite quickly. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of information, as Paul said, on the Ofgem website. So there's a phone number, ESAS 0300 123 1234, which will answer any of your applications. Ofgem's website is there. Our email address at deck on the bottom. And if you're thinking of doing more than one house with a boiler, the non-domestic scheme, Ofgem also have a significant amount of information there. So talk to experts first, make decisions based on the scheme and the eligibility, so that you don't miss out on the opportunity of taking advantage of the RHI. It is there to help you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Patrick and Paul. That's a great double act. Really useful information about how people can need to go about this and what to expect when they do. I'm sure it's going to be really useful. I'll just remind people that they can submit questions to our speakers at any time. Just go to the red speech bubble or Q&A box at the bottom, and you'll be able to submit them. It's probably worth just bringing up, we have got some questions coming in. It's probably just worth making one point of clarification. One questioner asked, if the Green Deal recommendations specify solid wall insulation, this is not required to be eligible for RHI, or only an easy-to-treat cavity. Only that needs to have been done before the RHI follows. And I think, Patrick, that's correct, isn't it?
Yes, I've posted an answer to that. That's correct.
Yes.
It's only cavity walls where you've got cavity walls that can be treated need to be done. And as I said, if you've got solid wall and you do it after your EPC, we will still pay you as if you don't have the solid wall, and that is so you will get more money, or you will save more money, and that is an incentive there for you to make use of.
It certainly is a good incentive. Thanks very much, Patrick. Okay, now we'll move on to our final speaker, Ben Glancy from New Form Energy. Ben, would you like to pick up the story?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you to Paul and Patrick. Very clear description of the process. I'm not going to add much to that, really, apart from just a roundup and possibly a little bit from the sort of installer side. I'm just trying to get the slide up. There we go. So, yeah, Ben, New Form Energy. So, essentially, I'm going to do a very quick, it says very at the top there, because it is going to be a very basic overview of the RHI. But again, like I say, trying to sort of put across the installer side and also the client side a little bit. So, very quickly, government have a reduction target, obviously, as we all know. Residential properties, obviously we were talking about the residential RHI here, are a big part of that, and obviously do need to be addressed. This is obvious to everybody, but it's worth mentioning. The target is reduction, so the vehicle of that is renewables. We're not talking about the target isn't to increase renewable technologies being out there, although obviously that's great for the industry. The target is reduction. One of the problems, and this isn't obviously just for DEC or Ofgem, this is a nationwide thing, that we need to look at how we change people's attitudes to the way they use their energy, understanding the outcomes of how they go about their daily lives. Not to change their ways, but just to understand and leave it up to them to make small alterations possibly. But also, how do we do that and guarantee that we're going to get the reductions required? So obviously RHI, the incentive part, incentivizing people financially is always a good thing. But the key here, which is the beauty of the RHI really, is the criteria. You're by providing that certain criteria are met, you get that incentive. This allows us to sort of guarantee that we're getting those reductions. So obviously, as Paul and Patrick have explained, the the financial benefits of that, so reduced initial outlay, reduced maintenance costs across the year, and you've obviously got these payments coming in as you go. So really what that's doing is you're sort of just bridging the gap from, say, a conventional system that you may have. You may be replacing your boiler or oil or gas. But if we can bridge that gap for the meantime until those prices become a bit nearer, as more people take that up, systems become refined as well. So we're sort of creating an artificial sort of parity in a levelized energy. By offering that incentive based on metering criteria, that's the important part, each system design needs to be thought through and requires input from the homeowner. This has the potential to influence people's attitudes and knowledge of sustainability, which is something not achieved under the feed-in tariff. Now, the reason I mention the feed-in tariff is only because, as an example, because it's something that a lot of us will be sort of familiar with that scheme and the way that's set up. So, yes, to a certain extent, you can export heat, especially district heating systems. But if we keep basic for argument's sake, on a basic level, you don't export heat. So on a PV, it's seen more, or it can be at least these days, more like a sort of a savings account on your roof. And the amount you're generating isn't really tailored to the individual or the household. It's largely irrelevant, providing obviously capacity permitting. You can send that energy back somewhere. It's always going to be used somewhere. The difference here with the RHI is by ensuring the system is generating correct levels of heat and energy. So that's correct to the household. You need closer scrutiny. So you've really got to look at the system, how it's being used, how the people who live in that house are going to use that energy. Can it be future-proofed? Are they going to have children? Energy use is going to change. That system requires payments, and those payments are made based on the reductions, not the generation. And I think that's the key difference there. And again, as I think Patrick mentioned, this is paid out of taxpayers' money. So the more scrutiny applied, I think can only be a good thing. So these are just some, I say, frequently asked questions. They're more issues that, from an installer point of view, we have fellow installers from different firms, and also for customers. These are issues that have been raised. I just wanted to sort of run through them quickly. So these are the things we hear on a daily basis. Legislation, bureaucracy, there's lots of paperwork to do, blah, blah, blah. Lack of clarity on the products and systems. Now, I've put a sentence here, but I'll go into it more. But essentially, carving out simple laws that apply to any industry is tricky. When the industry is new, with complex hybridized systems, constant release of new product systems, it becomes almost impossible, and the result is inflexibility. Now, that's sort of a sum up of how a lot of people have put sort of issues across. I'd like to counteract that. Purely, the industry is extremely big. It's very new. There are many, many different products coming out who all want to be eligible for some kind of tariff, so they can, potentially sell more. It's a huge undertaking to have simple legislation to cover all of that, and I believe, and a lot of my industry peers do, that the RHI fits that perfectly. One of the issues is a constant issue that we've had for years, and that goes back for Corgi turning into gas safe, to NIC's new laws and MCS. That there's a lot of paperwork to do, but actually, the RHA falls into the same bracket here. The paperwork that you have to do is purely a record of your work process to design a system for someone in the first place. There's no additional information really required. So if you're proposing a system that meets the customer's needs, all you're doing is passing over a copy of your workings, and that's been the same for MCS and the same for gas safe and whatnot. So providing your in-house organisation and your paperwork is good, that there's no real additional effort, and once you get into that as an installer, it's actually very, very simple. And it's also clear for the customer. We have to make sure, there's a big part of this is protecting that consumer and making sure they understand what system they're going to get and they're confident in what they're going to get. And again, from the homeowner's point of view, lots of questions all the time about the process. How do I know if I'm eligible? And what about the paperwork? Okay, again, the guys have gone over this recently. So there are guidelines. Deck and Ofgem have got their own guidelines. We have our own system being put on our website, and I'd urge any other installer or any other company to do the same. Purely, for ease of mind for the customer. If they want to look at it and have a good think about before they contact you, they may want to really understand what they're looking for before they ask someone else, and that needs to be there for them. But how you apply for the RHI and all of that, again, would be coming under your installer. So your installer have approved system at a design stage for compliance and other accreditations. There's some issues with legislation. There has been, there's sometimes where certain products aren't ready, or there's customers want to use certain products in a way that means that you can't meter that properly, or it's essentially is just a byproduct of having a system that's combined and hybridized. Sometimes you need to really think about how you put that together. That means there's clear payments can be made on that. And again, that's down to the installer and the customer to sit down and discuss that. And Ofgem and DEC are there to help, and they have been very helpful with everybody I've talked to on that subject. So again, just to recap on that, this is just a very simple table. If you look at what's been set out as issues that need to be covered to hit that reduction, and really how that's reflected in the RHI policy. So we're looking at cost effectiveness for alternative systems as a combat against conventional. We've covered that. There's finance in place, and also strict criteria to make sure that system's being put in isn't just generating random amounts of energy that no one else can use. It's actually generating and paid on the amount that household requires, and is fit for purpose. Again, cost effectiveness for alternatives to conventional heating systems. That's something that's said. So better education and understanding of our activities and their effect impacting the energy use. Again, like I just said, the RHI eligibility criteria demands that those discussions have been made with the customer and with the installer. So purely by following that process, you're accrediting yourself really. Better understanding of available solutions, effective implementation, and fit-for-purpose design. Again, the criteria demands that evidence is there. And again, as Patrick mentioned, that only certain products are available, and there is a reason for that, and that's because they need to be tried and tested. Otherwise, you can't guarantee that you're giving payments for the right reasons. The last one really is confidence in the system that we discussed before, especially for early uptakers. These are the people who might, sort of keeping up with the Joneses. They're talking to their neighbours and saying, look what I've got. I've had it a year and it's been fantastic. Next door, being a guinea pig, it's going to be a lot easier for you to think, actually, that's not such a bad idea. And the way we guarantee that can work is by looking at the additional schemes, which the RHI does. The RHI, you can't have that until you've looked at your MCSE Green Deal and EPCs. So from the beginning all the way through the process, by following the criteria and achieving the right certificates, you are sort of accrediting yourself. And all I would say is providing people follow the guidelines and discuss openly with their customers. It's actually a very accessible and easy process. These are just some of the tariff rates, but we've already seen these earlier on. And again, these are I think these are the non-domestic as well. So these can be distributed, and again, these are on the DEC and Ofgem's website as well. And that's really it. Like I said, just a roundup of what the guys have already covered very clearly. So that's me.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ben, and thanks again to Paul and Patrick for your very clear description. This is Janet Wood back again. And I can see that we do have some questions coming in to our speakers, and perhaps I can pass some of them on. And one question that does seem to be coming up is over paperwork. Why do applicants need a GDA and an EPC? And there seems to be a lack of consistency between what's required on those two bits of certification. And sorry to provide another three-letter acronym, but another question asks whether you need an SPF. I suspect Patrick or Paul, one of you would like to pick that up.
So the policy design is that you need to have a Green Deal assessment. The Green Deal assessment comes in two parts, one of which is the EPC and one of which is the Green Deal Advisors Report, the occupancy assessment. you need to do the Green Deal assessment. So having an EPC or getting an EPC doesn't count, and that's just the way that we have designed the scheme, because we think that the Green Deal assessment is a very important part of. I mean, if you think about it like a car, you get your car MOT'd after a certain age. You get your car MOT'd every year, A, because you have to, and B, because it's a sensible thing to do, so you know any problems that are coming up so that you can fix them. The Green Deal assessment and the occupancy assessment basically combine to give you an MOT for your house. And we think that that's an important thing for people to do so they can see what they can do to improve their house and to make their house a better place. The EPCs, unfortunately, are not as regulated as the Green Deal assessments. We have seen cases of people doing them from Google Earth, by driving past houses, etc. So we are trying to ensure that we get the highest quality information about that house, and that the homeowner gets the highest quality advice on their home.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question from a social landlord here. They will be installing or are installing air source heat pumps in new build properties that are off the gas grid. Clearly that's a worthwhile thing to do, but it doesn't qualify for the RHI at the moment. Is that likely to change? What will be the situation there?
So the reason that it wasn't included was that when we designed the policy back in 2012, early 2013, there was a ongoing discussion about building regulations, the aspiration to zero carbon homes for all new builds, and that includes social housing building, and that this was potentially going to be a requirement of building regulations and building standards, and therefore you wouldn't spend taxpayers' money paying people to meet their legal obligations. As the building regs come out, and they came out earlier this year, we are reviewing those, looking at what they do on the ground, and basically trying to find out whether that is happening, what the implications of that are, and we will continue to alter the scheme in order to ensure that we get the best value for both the taxpayer and for the housing stock that we have.
Following on from that, something that I think seemed to come up from Ben was perhaps new technologies coming into the scheme in future. And one concern that I'm seeing from questioners is whether the tariff that's available might change. And I suspect there are two points there. Whether the tariff available when you take up the scheme for the life of it will change, or whether once you've joined the scheme, your tariff is likely to change while you're on it. And I think generally there's a good record in saying that once you're in the scheme, you can be sure that your tariff won't change. But what might
can I just add to that? It will change, but it will go up with RPI.
Oh yes, sorry, I meant we wouldn't digress. But I think there's perhaps you'd like to answer the likely future things that might change in future in this scheme, in the sense of new what might happen to tariffs and what might happen to technologies.
So again, I mean, as I said, this is a living scheme. We have set out clearly our budgets from the launch in April through to March 2016. In regulations, it is clear on the websites where the triggers for digression are. So we have built in a system whereby if any one technology is doing significantly better than we would have expected based on previous market performance and things, that we can reduce the price of that by 10% in the first instance. So, for instance, biomass boilers are currently at 12.2p. If you took 1.2p off that, it would be 11p. That doesn't mean the scheme closes in any way. It doesn't affect those people who are on the scheme. It's just for new applicants, and you can track on the website both the trigger points that make that digression happen and current sales. that only is impacted by the new sales. So legacy has no part in determining a digression point in the domestic scheme. So at the moment, with the figures that we've got, we've just passed the digression point that where nothing happened. The next one is, I think, January. So.
Right, and just to reinforce that message to people who are already on the scheme or who are joining with a legacy system, they can be sure of what their tariff will remain the same, apart from the RPI increase.
Indeed.
Thank you.
I mean, there is a question longer term post March 2016 about how much budget the scheme has, what new technologies we bring in, and that side of things that will be determined by the general election. But up to March 2016, everything is laid out in regulations.
Okay, great. We're getting a few questions from people who have access to woodland and would like to know whether they can access the scheme. One, for example, says they're in a non-oil area but with a small woodland. Does the scheme cover wood burners for space heating with a back boiler for water? Getting into some detail there. One other of our woodland owners has experienced some difficulty getting her paperwork through. As I understand it, is there a hiccup in the process there?
Go on, Paul.
I'm quite happy to say that one, Patrick. The question specifically states that we've asked for sustainability information. I don't know why that would have been. We're not asking people for sustainability information for biomass at this time. That's something that will be coming in at some point next year, we believe. But at the moment, the regulations are quite clear that the fuel that is sourced, you should keep payment records and invoices or receipts to demonstrate that the fuel that is being burnt is in line with the manufacturer's certification. In terms of the sustainability, that is something to be aware of. It's something to plan for because new rules will be coming in around sustainability. Obviously, we want fuels to be burnt for the renewable scheme to be as sustainable and renewable as possible. In terms of the woodland, particularly if it's local, there's no real reason why that wouldn't be okay. When the new rules come into force, people will be asked to register with the biomass suppliers list. You can register as a self-supplier. I believe that process is simplified for self-suppliers to simply demonstrate where the wood comes from and that there is some form of management plan for that. At the moment, there are no sustainability requirements. However, you may be asked to demonstrate through an audit process, but not at the application stage, that the fuel that you're sourcing is appropriate for the product that you have.
The application process that you showed us in the slides with the instant response in many cases, I'm sure will be very welcome to people. They won't want to wait to find out. If they do need to return and provide more information and they can't get an instant response, how long is that taking at the moment?
So when people are flagged for being in review, the intention is that within 5 working days we will have submitted a request via email, usually specifically for the information that we need. Usually that's 1, possibly 2 documents, depending on how many triggers have been hit for review. Those can be emailed immediately. On our website we have a help sheet that says the most common reasons for review. If somebody does go into review, I'd recommend downloading that help sheet, and they could identify why they've gone into review and start thinking about preparing those documents, so that when they receive the email asking for those documents, they can have them to hand, upload scans or photocopies, and email them straight to us. And as soon as we receive those, we can start the review, and the process should go through very smoothly and very quickly. If there's anything else that we need, we'll come back straight away and ask for it.
Okay. Another social landlord question here, and I can see that there's some very big opportunities there. What is there? Is there a limit to what a social landlord can apply for? Are there any limits on that?
No, quite simply. A social landlord obviously will have a range of properties and therefore would be advised to consider both the non-domestic and the domestic depending on the housing stock. So any heat networks, communal heating systems that they're putting in, where they're heating a block of flats or a number of properties off a single system, is eligible for the non-domestic scheme. The interesting part of that is obviously that ECO has just made district heating a primary measure as well, so there may well be some energy company obligation money around to support some of those within the social housing sector. On the domestic side, it will be where they are putting one renewable in for one house. There is no limit in how many properties you can apply for, but you can only have one system for each of the properties, unless you're doing solar thermal as well, where you can have solar thermal and a heat pump or biomass boiler and claim a tariff for both. Or indeed solar PV and claim a feed-in tariff and an RHI for the same property.
Right. You can be quite ambitious. What if you decide that you want to move or pass the property on to something else? What's the situation there? Does the scheme just carry on?
I can take that one, Patrick. So you can transfer your membership to, if you decide within the 7 years that you are going to sell your house, then you can transfer that to the new member. We will obviously do the correct checks. We will ask the current member that this is something that they give their consent to, and we will obviously need all the details for the new member. But whatever the remaining payments are, so initially there are 28 payments, whatever of those 28 payments are remaining will then be paid to the new customer, the new owner of the system and the new owner of the house usually. So there's nothing to prevent anyone from selling their house. Similarly, if unfortunately somebody dies, then obviously that can be transferred to their offspring, or if their house is sold on to someone new in the same way as any transfer of ownership. We will probably obviously do some checks that that this has consent for it to happen, but yeah, there's nothing to stop anything being transferred.
Good. Ben, you've got experience from the installer side. Is there anything that you wanted to, any extra advice that you wanted to give to listeners?
I'd say for an installer, if this is something they want to really embrace, I would say the lesson that I learnt very very quickly is that record your processes. So something that as an installer you may have done for years and years with your customers, know exactly how to discuss a system with them and design it. In your head it's perfect, but get out of that habit very quickly and keep a record, because when it comes to your paperwork, like I said before, you have everything already done. Retrospectively trying to remember is very difficult and will waste a lot of time. As soon as you get in that habit, actually this becomes a real great tool rather than a hindrance. I think for a customer, the same, I would just suggest discussing with your installer or whoever as much as possible. Get as much information as you can together, and you'd be surprised how many people are afraid to ask more questions once the ball is rolling. Always ask as much as you want. Change your mind. Do whatever you need to make sure you're confident and comfortable. A small change in your sort of your activities and the way you do things, coming home slightly earlier, later, may be a small change to you, but can make a massive change to how your system works. And if you want to make sure that that's optimum, just discuss it properly before you commit.
That sounds like very good advice. I think we've got time just for one more quick question. If a public institute, in this case university, that works on developing energy crop supplies for an industrial RHI, does it have to be off the gas grid to be eligible?
No, there is no requirement in either scheme that you are off gas grid. It is only in the domestic scheme where we have used oil as the fuel saving for the calculations that I showed, that you will see better rates of return because of those the additional fuel savings against oil rather than gas. So whether you're an individual homeowner, whether you're a university, whether you're a business, wherever you are in the country, you can install a renewable technology and claim the RHI as long as you're eligible, and you will get the benefits. You will need to have just worked out the benefits and the costs across the piece for you and that building.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time, even though questions are still coming in on what's obviously prompted a lot of interest. And I'd certainly say that this is going to become quite a familiar scheme quite soon. We've already seen 10,000 individual schemes accredited, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more. So Patrick, Paul and Ben, I'd really like to thank you for your input, and perhaps leave listeners with a couple of pieces of advice, which seem to be work with your installer and make sure that you record everything, and feel free to ask, effectively you're encouraged to ask Ofgem or DEC for advice if you need help, but there is plenty of information on the website. And for those who found that these slides and the webinar very useful, it'll still be available for the next 24 hours, and anybody who has registered should all receive a link by email to enable you to see it again. But I'm afraid we've run out of time, so thanks very much, speakers, and I hope you've enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you.